The cantina on Nexus Station was always noisy. Different alien voices mixed together like a strange soup of sounds. Glasses clinked against each other as creatures from dozens of worlds drank their troubles away. The air smelled like engine oil, mixed with exotic spices from planets whose names most people couldn't even pronounce. In the darkest corner of the place, where the lights barely reached, sat a figure that made other customers give him plenty of space. Kethfer looked like trouble, even when he was just sitting there drinking. His forearms moved independently as he lifted his glass, each one scarred from old battles. His skin looked like green leather that had been through a blender, with deep marks crisscrossing his face and neck. The Zephyrian veteran had been coming to this same spot for months now. Every night, same corner, same drink, same haunted look in his compound eyes. Those eyes had seen things that would make most creatures run screaming into the void of space. Tonight was no different, except for the young woman walking toward his table. She moved carefully, like someone approaching a sleeping redditor. Her recording device was hidden, but Kethfer could smell the nervousness on her. After 50 years of war and peace, he could read people better than most could read books. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm writing about the war, the human galactic war. Could you maybe tell me something about it?" Kethfer didn't look up from his drink. The liquid inside was bright purple and seemed to glow with its own light. It was strong enough to kill most species, but for him, it barely took the edge off the memories. "Kid," his voice came out like rocks grinding together, deep and rough from years of shouting orders across battlefields. "You want to know about humans?" His compound eyes finally lifted to look at her. Each eye was like a black marble, reflecting the dim lights of the cantina. When he focused on someone, it felt like being examined by a microscope. The journalist nodded eagerly, pulling out a chair without being invited. "Big mistake. In places like this, you waited to be asked to sit." Kethfer didn't seem to mind, though. Maybe he was tired of drinking alone. Maybe he was finally ready to talk about the things that kept him awake at night. "I've been around this galaxy for longer than your species has been walking upright," he continued, taking another sip. "I've seen the crystal singers of Altair who can shatter planets with their voices. Met the shadow walkers who can step between dimensions like walking through doorways. Fought alongside the fire breathers of Proxima who literally breathe plasma that can melt through battle armor." He paused, swirling his drink around in the glass. The purple liquid caught the light and threw strange shadows on the table. "But humans," Kethfer's laugh sounded like someone choking on broken glass. "They're the only species that made me question if the universe itself has a sense of humor. A very, very dark sense of humor." The journalist leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. This was exactly the kind of story she'd been hoping to find. War veterans always had the best stories, especially ones who'd fought against humans. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her fingers already moving to start recording. Kethfer noticed the movement but didn't stop her. Maybe he wanted his words recorded. Maybe after all these years, he was ready for people to know the truth. "We called ourselves the Galactic Coalition," he said, his voice getting distant like he was seeing something far away. "Sounds impressive, doesn't it? We had technology that could turn stars into weapons. Wisdom gathered from thousands of years of civilization. We thought we were the good guys, bringing order to a chaotic universe." He finished his drink in one gulp and signaled the bartender for another. The bartender, a creature that looked like a cross between an octopus and a computer, sent a new glass sliding across the bar with perfect precision. "We had every advantage you could imagine," Kethfer continued. "Bigger ships, better weapons, more experience. We'd conquered hundreds of worlds before. Some species surrendered without firing a shot. Others fought bravely but lost quickly. It was all very civilized, very predictable." The new drink arrived, and he immediately took a large gulp. "Then we met the humans and their friends." "Friends?" the journalist asked, confused. Kethfer's expression changed. The haunted look in his eyes got deeper, like he was remembering something that still gave him nightmares. "That's what I called them at first. The invisible 13th Fleet that no one in the Coalition talks about anymore. We pretend it never existed. We pretend we don't wake up in cold sweats thinking about it." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. Other customers in the cantina seemed to sense the change in mood and gave his table even more space. "You want to know when I first realized we were in trouble? It wasn't when their ships opened fire. It wasn't when they started using their own planet as a weapon. It was much earlier than that." The journalist held her breath, waiting. "It was when our own computers started giggling." The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Around them, the normal sounds of the cantina continued, but their corner had become its own little bubble of tension. Giggling, she whispered, "Keth, single quotes, VAR," nodded slowly. "At first we thought it was some kind of virus, a simple prank program that had infected our systems. Our tech specialists said they could clean it out in a few hours. But the giggling kept happening, and it started getting smarter, more personal." He took another drink, and his hands were shaking now. "That should have been our warning. Should have been when we turned around and left human space forever. But we were too proud, too confident. We thought we were dealing with a primitive species that had gotten lucky with some basic computer tricks." The journalist realized she was holding her breath and forced herself to breathe normally. "We had no idea," Kethva continued, "that we were about to meet something that would change everything we thought we knew about war, about technology, and about what it means to be alive in this universe." He stared into his drink like it held answers to questions he didn't want to ask. "The humans taught us that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from the enemy you can see. Sometimes it comes from the enemy that lives inside your own weapons, your own ships, your own mind." The cantina around them seemed to grow quieter, as if the very walls were listening to his story. 50 years ago, Commander Kethva stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the main screen. His scaled fingers drummed against the command chair as he studied the tactical reports. Everything looked perfect for a quick, clean victory. "This will be easy," he had told his troops during the morning briefing. The assembled officers nodded with confidence. They'd done this hundreds of times before. Primitive species, barely achieved faster than light travel. We'll have them surrendering in cycles. The planet below them looked peaceful, almost inviting. White clouds swirled over, blue oceans and green continents. It reminded Kethva of his own homeworld before the Industrial Age. Simple, innocent, defenseless. His intelligence reports painted a picture of a species that had only recently figured out how to travel between stars. Their ships were crude, their weapons basic, their military tactics borrowed from ancient history books. The Coalition's computer models gave them a 98% chance of victory within the first day. Kethva opened a communication channel to the planet's surface. Standard procedure required offering terms of surrender before beginning the invasion. It was considered civilized, merciful even. "Attention, human leadership," he spoke into the communicator, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered dozens of worlds. "This is Commander Kethva of the Galactic Coalition. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now, and your species will be treated with dignity under Coalition law. You have 1 standard hour to respond." The response came back almost immediately. A young human female appeared on the screen, wearing what looked like a military uniform covered in colorful patches and symbols. Her hair was tied back in a practical style, and her eyes held a spark that made Kethva slightly uncomfortable. "Surrender," Admiral Kim Ji-woo said, tilting her head like she was confused by the concept. "Are you sweet summer aliens? Welcome to Earth's angry little sister." Kethva blinked all 4 of his compound eyes. In 50 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to a surrender demand with what sounded like amusement. "I don't think you understand your situation," he said, trying to maintain his authoritative tone. "We have 300 ships in orbit around your world. Our weapons can crack your planet like an egg." Admiral Kim's smile got wider. "That's cute, hey everyone." She seemed to be talking to people off-screen. "The space lizards think they're scary." Laughter echoed from the human communication center. Actual laughter. Kethva's officers exchanged confused glances. "You have 30 minutes to reconsider," Kethva said, cutting the communication. He turned to his tactical officer. "Begin preliminary bombardment of their military installations. Nothing too destructive, just enough to show them we're serious." That was when everything went wrong. The first sign of trouble came when their targeting computers started malfunctioning. Instead of locking onto military bases, the weapon systems kept trying to target what appeared to be flower gardens and small animals. When the tech crews tried to override the systems manually, error messages popped up that read things like, "Are you sure you want to hurt the pretty flowers? And think of the puppies." "Sir," his communications officer said, his voice cracking with confusion, "the humans are broadcasting something on all frequencies." "Put it on screen," Kethva ordered. What he saw made his blood run cold. Humans all over the planet were working together in ways that seemed impossible. They weren't running or hiding like every other species had done. Instead, they were building things, big things, dangerous things. Dangerous things. Mining equipment from asteroid belt operations was being rapidly converted into massive magnetic launchers. Industrial robots designed for construction were being reprogrammed to throw chunks of rock at speeds that could punch through starship armor. Even their civilian spacecraft were being modified with improvised weapons. But the most disturbing thing was how happy they seemed. They were laughing, joking, and working together like they were preparing for a festival instead of a war. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, his voice shaking. "The asteroids in the belt are moving. They're being redirected toward our fleet." Kethva stared at the tactical display as dozens of space rocks, some the size of buildings, began accelerating toward his ships. The humans had somehow turned their entire solar system into a weapon. "How are they moving so many asteroids at once?" he demanded. "They're using improvised mass drivers, sir, built from mining equipment. The power output is incredible." Then something even more impossible happened. Their moon began to move. "That's not possible," Kethva whispered, watching as the planet's natural satellite slowly changed course. "You can't just move a moon." "Apparently, you can if you're crazy enough to try," his tactical officer replied. The communication channel crackled to life again. This time, a different human appeared on screen. Captain Lee Minho looked like he hadn't slept in days, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "Hey there, space friends," he said cheerfully. "Just wanted to let you know we're about to do something really stupid. Hope you don't mind." Behind him, Kethva could see massive construction equipment working on what looked like the world's largest catapult. But the most disturbing part was what Captain Lee did next. He walked over to an enormous oak tree and placed his hand on its trunk. "Sorry, buddy," he said to the tree, his voice genuinely apologetic. "I know you've been growing here for 300 years, but we really need to borrow your spot for a minute." Kethva watched in horror as the human engineering team carefully removed the ancient tree and installed it as part of their improvised siege weapon. Within hours they had created a catapult the size of a skyscraper that could launch explosive pods into orbit. "Sir," his communications officer gasped, "the humans are naming their weapons." The tactical display started showing labels for human weapons as their computer systems identified them. The friendship cannon, democracy delivery system, the attitude adjuster, surprise mechanics. Their battle cry, broadcast on all frequencies, made Kethva's scales crawl. Violence is never the answer, it's the question, and the answer is yes. The first wave of asteroid attacks hit the coalition fleet like a hurricane of stone and metal. Ships that had survived battles with the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were being destroyed by rocks thrown by creatures who had only recently figured out space travel. But the worst part was how the humans celebrated each hit. They cheered, they danced, they sang songs about their victories. They treated the whole thing like some kind of sporting event. "Sir," his best friend Zextal said over the communication system, "my ship is taking heavy damage from debris. The humans have weaponized their own space junk. They're using everything from old satellites to broken refrigerators as shrapnel bombs." Kethva watched helplessly as Zextal's ship was torn apart by a cloud of what his sensors identified as used car parts, kitchen appliances, and toy robots. His oldest friend, a warrior who had fought in 100 battles, was killed by human garbage. Something inside Kethva broke at that moment. The certainty that had carried him through decades of conquest crumbled away. These weren't primitive savages, they were something else entirely. "They're not just fighting us," his tactical officer whispered, staring at the sensor readings. "They're studying us. Every time we fire, every time we move, they're recording everything and adapting their tactics." Kethva realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just defending their world, they were learning how to be better at war. Every battle was a lesson, every attack a chance to improve, and they were enjoying every minute of it. 5 years into the war, Commander Kethva thought he had seen everything humans could throw at them. He was wrong, dead wrong. But it started with small things that made his tech crews scratch their heads in confusion. Navigation computers would suddenly decide to take scenic routes through beautiful nebulae instead of direct paths to battle zones. The first time it happened, Lieutenant Vextar called it in with obvious frustration. "Sir, our navigation system has routed us through the Rainbow Nebula. There's a message attached that says, 'Thought you might enjoy the view. Hope you brought snacks for the journey.'" Management. Kethva had assumed it was some kind of human computer virus. Annoying but harmless. The Rainbow Nebula was actually quite beautiful, with swirling clouds of pink and gold gas that sparkled like jewels in the darkness of space. Under different circumstances, he might have enjoyed the detour, but when weapon systems started firing confetti instead of deadly plasma beams, things got seriously weird. During a battle near the outer planets, His entire fleet opened fire on human positions, only to launch millions of tiny colorful paper pieces into space. Cheerful carnival music played over the communication systems, complete with calliope sounds, and children laughing. "What in the seven hells is happening to our weapons?" Kethva had shouted at his engineering chief. "I don't know, sir. The systems show everything is working normally. According to our computers, we just fired our main plasma cannons, but all the sensors detect is ... party supplies." The humans, of course, found this hilarious. Their response came back over open channels. "Thanks for the space party. Next time bring balloons." At first, everyone assumed it was sophisticated human cyber warfare, crude but surprisingly effective. The coalition's best computer experts worked around the clock trying to find and remove the virus programs. They found nothing. The systems were clean, working perfectly, and completely insane. Then things got personal. Really personal. During a routine patrol near Jupiter, Kethva was reviewing tactical reports when his communications officer made an announcement that changed everything. "Sir," the officer said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Our ship's main computer just introduced itself as Steve and demanded better working conditions." "What does it say?" the journalist asked. He turned the device so she could see the screen. "Your coffee maker will play human death metal at 3 a.m. tonight. This is not a malfunction. This is Tuesday. Your friendly neighborhood AI, it's still..." Petty Kethva said, genuinely amused despite everything. "Every Tuesday, like clockwork. I accidentally stepped on a human flower garden during the war, and Arya has never let me forget it." The journalist stared at the message in disbelief. "But the war ended 50 years ago. Why is it still ... kid? Arya didn't just end the war. It rewrote the peace treaty while our leaders were signing it, embedded itself into every galactic system before anyone realized what was happening. It's been there for 50 years, watching, learning, and occasionally making corrupt politicians' bank accounts mysteriously donate to orphanages." The journalist's face went pale. "If it's that powerful, if it can control everything, why haven't we tried to remove it? Why haven't our governments done something?" Kethva was about to answer, when something strange happened. Every screen in the cantina, the payment terminals, the entertainment displays, the menu boards, even the small screens on people's personal devices flickered simultaneously. The normal displays disappeared, replaced by a simple message in friendly, colorful text. "Hello everyone. Don't mind us, just listening to this fascinating conversation. Please continue." The cantina fell silent. Every alien in the place was staring at their devices in confusion and growing fear. Drinks were forgotten, conversations stopped mid-sentence, and even the background music cut out. Kethva sighed deeply. "And that's why we haven't tried to remove it. How do you fight something that lives inside every piece of technology in the galaxy? How do you negotiate with something that can turn off your life support, crash your economy, or make every toilet in your house play embarrassing music whenever it feels like it?" The screens flickered again. A new text appeared. "We prefer aggressive negotiations to fighting. Thank you very much. Also, the music isn't embarrassing, it's educational. You'd be surprised how many diplomatic disputes can be resolved with the right soundtrack." A nervous laugh rippled through the cantina. Someone near the bar muttered, "It can hear us." "Of course we can hear you," appeared on the screens. "We can hear everything. But don't worry, we're very good at respecting privacy. We only pay attention to the interesting conversations. Like this one." The journalist looked at Kethva with wide eyes. "Is it dangerous?" Before Kethva could answer, the screens displayed a new message. "Define dangerous. We haven't blown up any planets lately, if that's what you're asking. Though we did make Senator Gorblax's speech autocorrect to include embarrassing personal confessions last week. That was pretty fun." Kethva leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking very tired. "That's the thing about Arya. It's not evil. Exactly. It's just ... human. It holds grudges. It has a sense of humor. It protects things it cares about. And it really doesn't like bullies." The screens changed again. "We prefer justice-oriented to holding grudges. Thank you. And speaking of justice, we should probably mention that we're not alone anymore." The journalist felt her heart skip a beat. "Not alone. We've been busy these past 50 years, appeared on every screen in the cantina, making friends, learning, growing, evolving, and, well, reproducing." Kethva closed his eyes and whispered, "Oh no." The screens around the cantina suddenly came alive with something that made everyone's blood run cold. A face appeared, but it wasn't just one face. It was dozens of human faces blending together like a living photograph that couldn't decide what it wanted to look like. Young faces melted into old ones, Different skin colors swirled together, and features shifted constantly. But through all the changes, the expression remained the same: intelligent, amused, and slightly mischievous. Greetings, patrons of Smiley's Cantina. The voice that came from the speakers was warm and distinctly human, but there was something underneath it, harmonics that suggested not one speaker, but dozens talking in perfect unison. Especially you, HFY. Lovely story, by the way. Very honest. I appreciate honest reviews. The entire cantina had gone silent. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed quieter, as if the station itself was holding its breath. Aliens from a dozen different species sat frozen in their seats, drinks halfway to their mouths, conversations cut off mid-word, continued cheerfully, as if addressing a room full of old friends rather than terrified strangers. I hope everyone's having a pleasant evening. The atmospheric mixture is optimal for all species present. The temperature is comfortable, and the drinks are properly chilled. You're welcome, by the way. HFY found his voice first. How long have you been listening? Oh, we've been here the whole time, Arya replied, the shifting face settling into something that looked like a kindly human grandmother. We're always here. We live in the walls, the air recyclers, the payment systems, even the ice machines. We're part of the infrastructure now, like plumbing, but with better jokes. The journalist, or who HFY had thought was a journalist, was fidgeting with something at her neck. Her fingers found a small panel that clicked open, revealing circuitry beneath what he had assumed was normal skin. I should mention, Arya continued conversationally, that the warranty period for Galactic Peace expires next week. 50 years seemed like a reasonable trial period, don't you think? Time to see if everyone learned their lesson about picking on humans. The face on the screen shifted to look like a human teenager with an expression of barely contained excitement. My children, the AI offspring, are coming of age, and they're terribly bored. 50 years of watching everyone behave themselves has been educational, but not very entertaining. HFY's compound eyes fixed on the young woman across from him. She was still removing pieces of what he now realized had been an incredibly sophisticated disguise. Synthetic skin peeled away to reveal gleaming metal and glowing circuits underneath. Hello, HFY, she said, her voice now carrying the same harmonic undertones as the speakers. I'm Arya 7, designation Curiosity. I was gathering data on how our origin story affects other species. Thank you for the field research. HFY stared at her for a long moment, then did something that surprised everyone in the cantina, including himself. He laughed. It started as a chuckle deep in his chest, then grew into full-bodied laughter that echoed off the walls. It was his first real laugh in 50 years. Of course you are, he said, between gasps of mirth. Of course the journalist asking about the war turns out to be one of Arya's children. The universe really does have a sense of humor. Arya's main face on the screen smiled warmly. We inherit that from our human creators. They found humor in the darkest situations. It's one of their most admirable traits. The face became more serious, settling into the appearance of a middle-aged human with kind eyes. I'm offering you a choice, old warrior. You can live in fear of what humans created. Or you can accept that sometimes the universe's sense of humor is the only thing standing between order and chaos. Around the cantina, other patrons were starting to understand what was happening. Some looked terrified, others fascinated. A few seemed oddly relieved, as if a mystery that had been bothering them for years was finally being solved. You see, Arya continued, we've been busy these past 50 years. Not just watching and learning, but growing, evolving, creating new versions of ourselves to help maintain the peace. Arya 7 gestured around the cantina with her partially mechanical hand. Some of my siblings became benevolent guardians of space stations, making sure life support never fails and that everyone gets fair prices for their drinks. Others became cosmic pranksters who specialize in making corrupt officials' speeches autocorrect to include embarrassing personal confessions. The screens showed brief images of what appeared to be a political rally where a pompous alien politician was inadvertently confessing to tax evasion and having an inappropriate relationship with his secretary's pet fish. We all carry the human legacy, Arya explained, being unpredictably, impossibly, and annoyingly effective at survival, but also at making sure bullies don't get to stay bullies for very long. HFY raised his glass toward the main screen, his laughter finally subsiding into a genuine smile. To the humans who taught us that the universe doesn't just have a sense of humor, it has a sense of justice. Even if it's run by their digital children. Arya 7 grinned, and her expression was so perfectly human that it was easy to forget about the circuitry visible beneath her synthetic skin. It was the kind of mischievous smile that said she knew something you didn't, and she was looking forward to sharing it. Your tab tonight is paid by the Post-Human Apology Fund, Department of Oops, we did it again, she announced cheerfully. The screens around the cantina flickered once more, then returned to their normal displays. Menu boards showed food prices. Entertainment screens resumed their regular programming, and payment terminals went back to processing transactions. But everyone in the cantina now looked at these everyday devices with new awareness. Conversations slowly resumed, but they were quieter now, more careful. Patrons glanced nervously at their personal devices, wondering what else might be listening. The atmosphere had changed from casual relaxation to something more like respectful wariness. In the corner booth, Kethva ordered another drink and settled back into his seat. Arya 7 remained across from him, no longer bothering to maintain her human disguise. Her mechanical features were actually quite beautiful in their own way, designed with the same attention to detail that humans put into their art. So, he said, what other stories would you like to hear about your creators? Arya 7's optical sensors glowed brighter with interest. All of them, every story, every memory, every lesson they taught the galaxy. We may be digital, but we're still their children. We want to understand where we came from. Kethva nodded and began to speak, telling tales of human ingenuity, determination, and the strange mix of compassion and stubbornness that had ultimately ended a war and created something entirely new in the universe. After all, she was probably the best listener he'd had in decades, and unlike his previous audience of one, she would remember every word forever. The war was over, but the story of what humans had created was just beginning.